From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
How the did this happen?
The American dream is dead. Stop resisting.
The president's powers here are beyond question.
Ladies and gentlemen, the last president of the United States.
Fahrenheit 11/9. Michael Moore is back with a new documentary on President Trump and the state of the nation.
Trump is the result of decades of us allowing this country to go down a road that had very little to do with democracy and equal rights and what was fair, and very much toward letting the rich, letting corporate America, Wall Street, run the show and call the shots.
Today, Oscar-winning filmmaker Michael Moore for the hour. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford has told the Senate Judiciary Committee she's prepared to testify before the committee about her allegation that Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh attempted to rape her at a high school party when she was 15 years old. In a letter to the committee, a lawyer for Dr. Blasey Ford ruled out testifying Monday, but said she would speak soon if the senators offer, quote, terms that are fair and which ensure her safety. In recent days, Dr. Blasey Ford has received death threats and been forced to move her family out of their home in Palo Alto. On Thursday, at least 56 protesters were arrested on Capitol Hill after they occupied the offices of key Republican senators.
Dr. Blasey, we believe Dr. Blasey! We still believe Anita Hill! We still believe Anita Hill!
Meanwhile, some Republican lawmakers are openly mocking Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's allegation that Kavanaugh attempted to rape her. This is Republican Congressmember Ralph Norman of South Carolina speaking on Thursday during a debate.
Did y'all hear the latest late-breaking news from the Kavanaugh hearings? Ruth Bader Ginsburg came out that she was groped by Abraham Lincoln.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has backed continued U.S. support for the Saudi-led assault on Yemen despite objections from his own staff. While specialists in the State Department warned about the rising civilian death toll in Yemen, Pompeo expressed concern any cutoff of support to Saudi Arabia could impact U.S. arms deals, including a plan to sell more than 120,000 precision-guided missiles to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The United Nations is warning Yemen is now facing the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. CNN has revealed federal agents have arrested dozens of undocumented immigrants who came forward to take care of migrant children in government custody. Between July and early September, ICE arrested at least 41 people seeking to take care of detained immigrant children. This comes as the government has acknowledged it now has a record 13,000 migrant children in its custody. Meanwhile, the Department of Health and Human Services is diverting up to $266 million from other programs to help pay for detaining the skyrocketing number of imprisoned children. Targeted programs include the National Cancer Institute, the Ryan White HIV/AIDS program, Head Start, the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and other refugee support programs. On Thursday, the White House marked the first anniversary of Hurricane Maria slamming into Puerto Rico by issuing a press release claiming the Trump administration has helped lead a historic recovery effort in Puerto Rico. But for many people there, the recovery has barely begun, and much of the blame has been focused on FEMA. Earlier this month, it was revealed more than 2,000 Puerto Ricans applied for funeral assistance after the storm. FEMA approved just 75 of the applications. Residents say FEMA has also refused to help them after they lost nearly everything in the storm.
When it rains, my whole house gets wet. It all broke apart the roof because the house above me was made from cheap materials, and so the whole roof opened up on the downstairs. People from FEMA came, and this lady said, "How are you still living here?" Because the water was up to here through the house and the walls. The water was there. A little while later, I got a letter from FEMA saying I didn't lose anything in the hurricane, but I lost my fridge and the washing machine. I lost almost everything, even my clothes, because everything got wet. The beds, my furniture, everything. I lost everything and I got nothing.
Spain's foreign minister has revealed President Trump recently urged Spain to build a wall across the Saharan desert in Africa to stop the flow of asylum seekers from Africa. Spain, which does not control any land in the Saharan desert, pushed back on the idea. Trump then reportedly said, quote, "The Sahara border can't be bigger than our border with Mexico." In fact, the Sahara stretches for about 3,000 miles from Mauritania and occupied Western Sahara on the Atlantic to Sudan in the east. The U.S.-Mexico border is roughly 2,000 miles long. The second longest wall in the world already exists in Africa. Morocco built a 1,700-mile wall or berm in occupied Western Sahara, dividing Sahrawis who remain under occupation from those who fled into exile. To see Democracy Now's special documentary, 4 Days in Occupied Western Sahara, a rare look inside Africa's last colony, go to DemocracyNow.org. In other news from Africa, at least 100 people have drowned after an overloaded ferry capsized on Lake Victoria in northern Tanzania on Thursday afternoon. It's feared the death toll will eventually top 200. The President of Ireland has officially repealed the constitutional amendment that banned abortion in Ireland. This comes in the wake of a historic referendum in May when Irish voters repealed one of the world's most restrictive abortion bans. Ireland's health minister has said he expects women to soon be able to get cost-free abortions in Ireland. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's former top aide is going to prison. Joseph Percoco was sentenced Thursday to 6 years for fraud and accepting more than $300,000 in bribes. Percoco was a longtime close personal friend of Cuomo's. And Harvard University has announced it will honor former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick with the university's W.E.B. Du Bois Medal, which is awarded to individuals who have made significant contributions to African and African-American history and culture. In 2016, Kaepernick began protesting police brutality and racism by taking a knee during the national anthem before NFL games, sparking ongoing league-wide protests. He's since been effectively blacklisted from the NFL. Other recipients of this year's W.E.B. Du Bois Medal include comedian Dave Chappelle and Brian Stevenson, founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, who oversaw the creation of the country's first memorial to victims of white supremacy. And in news from Brazil, the world-renowned dissident and linguist Noam Chomsky met with Brazil's imprisoned former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva Thursday. This comes a week after Lula officially pulled out of next month's presidential race. Lula has been jailed since April. Speaking outside the prison after his visit, Noam Chomsky condemned the right-wing media in Brazil.
We have just had the great privilege of spending an hour with Lula. And one of the points that he emphasized was that during his entire tenure in office, there was just a constant flood of attacks from all the media, constant, thousands of attacks from every direction, which of course confuses and undermines public opinion. So the answer to your question is something is needed to counter the concentrated power of right-wing media, which, particularly in Latin America, just overwhelms everything.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Fahrenheit 11/9. That's the name of the new documentary by Oscar-winning filmmaker Michael Moore. A stunning retelling of the 2016 election and its aftermath. 11/9. That's November 9th, the day Donald Trump won the 2016 presidential election. In the film, Michael Moore crosses the country, documenting not only the rise of Trumpism, but also the teachers' strike sweeping the nation, the blue wave of progressive candidates in the 2018 primaries, the rise of student activism after the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, and the water crisis in his hometown of Flint, Michigan. Michael Moore spares no one in the wide-ranging documentary, which takes aim at the Democratic establishment, the New York Times, and other mainstream media outlets, the Electoral College, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and even himself. Here's the trailer to Fahrenheit 11/9.
How the did this happen?
I'm sick and tired of people telling me that America's the greatest country because we can whip your ass.
I hate some of these people, but I'd never kill them.
How do you deal with this? You're never going to be able to unsee what you saw.
Try to impeach him. Just try it. You will have a spasm of violence in this country like you've never seen.
Governor Snyder, I got some Flint water for you.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, and you've got to make it stop.
If nobody's gonna do it, then I gotta do it.
And I don't give a who you are. I'll fight you in the damn street right now.
Okay, how the did this happen?
The American dream is dead. Stop resisting.
The president's powers here are beyond question.
Ladies and gentlemen, the last president of the United States.
Coming to an American city near you.
The trailer to Michael Moore's new film, Fahrenheit 11/9. It opens today in 1,800 theaters across the country. Well, earlier this week, Michael joined us in our studio. I began by asking him about the making of the film and if it's a sequel to his 2004 blockbuster, Fahrenheit 9/11, about George W. Bush.
It's not a sequel. It's the title just sort of came to us because Trump was declared president by the Associated Press at 2:29 in the morning on 11/9/16. But it is a cousin to that film, in the sense that when Bush was installed in the White House and had us in a couple of wars fairly quickly, we were in pretty bad shape. And so Fahrenheit 9/11 grew out of a desire to try and halt his efforts, especially the war effort. We're in a different kind of war now. We're in a war with not just an individual who's taken over the White House because, again, he wasn't elected, but he was appointed by the Electoral College. But Trump is the result of decades of us allowing this country to go down a road that had very little to do with democracy and equal rights and what was fair, and very much toward letting the rich, letting corporate America, Wall Street, run the show and call the shots. So when I say that, for instance, that Donald Trump doesn't care much about democracy and is trying to whittle away whatever he can of what we call our democracy, that's really, to be fair to him, not really unusual. He's a CEO. He's a billionaire. Generally, CEOs don't run their businesses like democracies. They don't like democracy. That's not how they live. It's not how they run their business. And as billionaires, they want to grab as much of the pie for themselves as possible. So they're not into everybody having a slice of the pie or a fair slice of the pie or a seat at the table. So he's really just acting like most people of his class. You know, I mean, I got to believe if you're a billionaire, you've got to really hate a system that says it's one person, one vote. Because if we really are one person, one vote, that means there's 325 million of us and probably less than 1,000 of them. Imagine if you were on the other side. If you were one of them, that doesn't look very good, because it means that 325 million can just suddenly pass laws and tell you what to do. So the basic concept of our democracy is that. But they know that they've been able to run that show because they've bought it. They buy the politicians, they buy the elections, and they have most working people in such a box that they know that if they were to protest, if they were to speak out, if they were to whistleblow, that would be the end of their income. And starting with Bill Clinton, we began eliminating the safety net when you don't have an income. And so we're now at the point where they've got those 325 million right where they want them, scared that they aren't going to be able to pay next month's bills. That statistic I saw recently, maybe you saw it, that the majority of Americans, almost 67%, do not have enough money in the bank or in their pocket to, if a loved one passed away tonight, and they lived here in New York, and the loved one was in California, they don't have the money for the plane ticket to go to California. In other words, the majority of Americans don't have $400 to $500 available in any form to them at any moment. That's the America we live in, and boy, does the billionaire class love that, because that's when you've got them. You don't ever think about when you're in that situation of complaining about what's going on, starting a union, or taking the day off to go to the funeral of a loved one.
So you go, Michael Moore, way back with Donald Trump, and in the film you show
You mean
this.
I personally go way back?
Yeah. Let's go back to 1998, when you appear on Roseanne Barr's talk show along with Donald Trump.
My next guest is kind of the philosophical polar opposite of Donald Trump, I think, but maybe not. We'll find out. His first film was the classic documentary Roger and Me, which was so great. Please welcome my blue-collar panelist, Michael Moore.
He's terrific, I tell you. I loved what he did. If I was Roger, I wouldn't have liked it, but I enjoyed it. I hope he never does one on me, though.
His nightmare begins September 21st when your film is out, Fahrenheit 11/9. So talk about that moment at Tavern on the Green in 1998.
Well, Roseanne's sitcom was over, and, you know, it was one of the most popular shows ever. She had a very working class, very good, her whole thing back then was really solid, good politically, everything. But the show was over, and ABC decided to give her an afternoon show, a talk show. And so she called up and said, would I come on the show? They did it in L.A., but they were going to do a week in New York at Tavern on the Green in Central Park. And I said, sure. And I get there, and I didn't realize Trump was going to be the other guest, which I was very happy about. So he wasn't. He didn't know I was going to be on the show. 2 years earlier, we were both booked to be on the old Politically Incorrect. I think back then it was on Comedy Central, before it was on ABC.
Bill Maher show.
Yes, his first show. And when I got there on Politically Incorrect, and he saw that I was there, he split. They were like all of a sudden without a guest, a fourth guest on the show. He would not appear anywhere with me, and he did not know I was going to be on Roseanne, and now he's really upset.
And you've done Roger and Me already.
Now yes, this is 10 years after Roger and Me, almost 10 years. So he knows.
General Motors.
Yes, and I've done TV Nation at that time, and I was in the process of starting The Awful Truth, which was the TV Nation when we moved it to another network. So he decides to leave again. And they ask him to please wait. They come to me and they say, oh my God, he's going to leave because of you. We don't want you to leave. Can you just talk to him? Can you just, calm him down or whatever? And I said, sure. So I went over to him, and this part isn't in the movie, but I go over to him, I shake his hand, it's all clammy, and I don't know why he's all nervous about me. And they said, you're thinking of leaving. Well, I don't want to go up there on the show. I don't want to go out and mix it up. And, I said, this is an afternoon talk show. It's Roseanne. It's comedy. Just relax. Don't leave. And essentially, I kind of promise him not to go after by that point, his various real estate dealings, how he's treating the workers, the Central Park Five, discriminating against, I think, out of the thousands of apartments they had out in their so-called middle-class housing in the boroughs, 7 were rented to black families. And I like to get him not to leave. I sort of promise him, and then so he does the show. And you'll see when you see the movie, I'm joke around, but I don't go after him.
So you're the reason he's president today?
Well, I'm just saying I didn't realize till later, especially until when he was running and I was watching his performance art. I thought, wow, this guy is good. When he talks about the art of the deal, he was playing me. He was negotiating the moment so he would be left alone by this documentary filmmaker who goes after corporate CEOs. And I thought, man, so this is how he's gotten this far. If he was no good at this, if he was just a charlatan, he wouldn't have lasted this long in New York City. He really knew how to play it and to play people. And so when I look at that now, I just think, even though I'm 20 years younger there, and I know you want to say I couldn't tell, but I'm like, all these years later, I'm thinking, wow, you never back down, Mike, I'm saying to myself. And you backed down, mainly because I felt bad for Roseanne, so that her show wouldn't be ruined that day. Now, here we are in 2018. I don't feel bad about Roseanne at all. She's totally gone off the cliff. When I see the two of them together on the show, they're the enemy at that point. Now in what do you call the opposite of hindsight? Present sight, future sight, wherever we're at now, we know what the score is.
Oscar-winning filmmaker Michael Moore. He's out with a new one today, Fahrenheit 11/9. We'll be back with him in a minute.
Who do you think you are? He plays us with his hate, turns man against man, but it's really not a game. And I pray to the ancestors' love, do not be fooled by this man's foolish talk. The serpent woke again in different times and places. There's a burning cross leading the mob, people in chains. He's a quack circus act creeping from the past. He's the symbol of the monster we no longer want to be, what we used to be. The earth trembles with these names: Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, Pinochet. No respect for woman, no respect for race, no respect for anything that lives. The human race.
Demagogue, performed by Leela Downs here in our Democracy Now! Studios. To see her perform the whole song as well as the interview, go to democracynow.org. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. As we return to our conversation with the Academy Award-winning filmmaker Michael Moore, his new film out today, Fahrenheit 11/9. I spoke to him earlier this week. Your film, you start with that remarkable day, but you actually start before, and you were talking about this way before. you wrote in July 2016, again, before Trump was elected,
right.
5 reasons why Trump will win. In it, you wrote, quote, Donald J. Trump is going to win in November. This wretched, ignorant, dangerous, part-time clown and full-time sociopath is going to be our next president, President Trump. Go ahead, say the words, because you'll be saying them for the next 4 years, President Trump. You went on to list the 5 reasons you believe Trump would be president. Trump's focus on the Midwest, the last stand of the angry white man, the Hillary problem, the depressed Sanders vote, and what you call the Jesse Ventura effect, people voting for Trump simply to disrupt the system. You were predicting this well in advance. And you show anyone who says something otherwise in the corporate media, this moment of George Stephanopoulos and Keith Ellison is priceless.
Yes. Okay. First of all, I take no pleasure in being right. I never wanted to be more wrong when I wrote that. But I had just come back from the UK where my last film, Where to Invade Next, had just opened. And so I went and did press throughout the UK, in London, in Sheffield, ending up in Belfast. And a lot of crowds and theater screenings with the working class of the United Kingdom. This was the week before Brexit. And I saw what I see and hear a lot in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio and elsewhere, where people didn't necessarily like were in love with the idea of Brexit, but they loved being able to have the chance to go into the voting booth and throw a Molotov cocktail into the middle of a system that had left them broke and in despair. And when we left the UK there just before the vote, we were all saying, that my crew and friends, wow, this just sounds like many parts of the United States. And if it looks like Brexit's going to pass, even though all the polls said that it wasn't going to. We came back here, and of course, all the polls, Brexit did pass, and all the polls here were saying that Hillary had it in the bag.
And the day that Brexit passed, Donald Trump flew into Scotland to sell his, to push the sale of his golf course.
Yes.
And a young comedian stood up right before he spoke on this windswept precipice and said something like, Donald Trump's balls are available in the golf shop.
Yes.
And he's showing these red golf balls with swastikas on them.
These are the new balls available from the clubhouse, part of the new Trump Turnberry range, and I forgot to hand them out.
That's that comedian, isn't it?
There were people who were trying to warn everybody else to not treat this as a joke, to take Trump seriously. And so I immediately I wrote that piece that you just referred to, and I went on Bill Maher, and I told the audience there that Trump was going to win, and he was going to win by winning Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the 3 electoral states that he won by. And I got booed. I got booed on Bill Maher. People did not want to hear it. And I said, look, I'm not saying it because I want that to happen. I'm saying it that we better realize they're having the Democratic Convention this week, and they're popping the champagne corks as if it's a done deal. Because everybody's mindset then throughout August and September and October was that, how could she lose to this guy? And in fact, she won. She won by 3 million votes. So that part people had right. But I just kept telling people, look, you're not looking at the right picture here. You're all liberal arts majors. You suck at math and geography. This is going to come down to the Electoral College. Are you counting this? Yes, in those popular vote polls, she was ahead. But that's unfortunately not the way the president gets picked. And because the Democratic Party and others have led no fight to get rid of the Electoral College since President Gore won in 2000, you'd think after that people go, this Electoral College, I think it's time for it to go. No. Now, there have been good people who've got the national popular vote thing going, and they've got it passed in a lot of states. If you haven't heard of this, go on nationalpopularvote.com. We have to get enough states to pass this law. The law says, can I go into this? Can I just explain this? The law says that if you pass in your state, that your state's electors will go to whoever wins the popular vote. But we've got to get enough states where we get the 270 electoral votes. We've got enough states now that have passed this where we're up to 172 electoral votes. So we just need enough states that have 98 electoral votes left, and then that's that. And now the winner, who actually wins the popular vote, will be the president of the United States. So there's a possibility of fixing this without having to go through the machinations of changing the Constitution. So to get back to what happened in the summer of '16, I couldn't get anywhere, and I couldn't convince Democratic Party leadership types. I couldn't get people who vote Democratic to listen to me. I started to feel I must have communication skill issues because somehow I'm not getting this through to people. You're not taking Trump seriously.
And you're talking about the blue states that
yes,
that Obama had won, that you thought Trump was going to win.
Yes, right. Yes.
Ohio and your home state.
And Pennsylvania.
Of Michigan.
Right. And I just couldn't get anybody to listen. Nobody thought it could happen because, are you kidding? He's such an idiot. He's crazy. I said, that's why he's going to win. You don't understand. He's an incredible performance artist. People love The Apprentice. I mean, people between the Hudson River and Interstate 5 love The Apprentice. They loved him on it because here's what he did every week. Whoever the biggest jerk was, on the show that week, got to hear, "You're fired." And everybody works with that jerk. Wherever you work, there's that one jerk. And the cathartic feeling you got watching The Apprentice of hearing somebody fire that jerk, people loved that show. And they loved Trump, and they loved hearing him say, "You're fired." But I couldn't get anybody to listen to this because on the coasts, within the bubble of the Democratic Party infrastructure, they don't watch The Apprentice. They also don't watch The Bachelorette either, by the way, which is a great show. I'm just saying that I pay attention to what my fellow Americans are watching and listening to.
So where does Gwen Stefani fit into this picture? Well,
Gwen Stefani, this is what I have known from the beginning of this, is that Trump found out. He was in negotiations for re-upping The Apprentice with NBC. And he found out that Gwen Stefani, who's one of the stars of The Voice, another show you're not watching.
You can't say that about me, but you're looking at the audience right now when you say that.
Actually, I'm not looking at the entire audience. The people watching right now who know that they don't watch The Voice or The Apprentice. Well, you can't watch it anymore. That one's off the air. Anyways, he found out that somebody else is getting paid more than him on NBC. And not just somebody else. Can I say it? A woman. A woman was being paid more than Donald J. Trump. And that, makes him go like this. So he decides that he's going to show NBC. He contacts another network to put them in competition for each other for The Apprentice. And then he comes up with this idea of holding an announcement. Not for real, just it's going to be a pretend thing. He's going to hold an announcement announcing he's running for president. And he's going to have a couple rallies. And he's going to show these networks just how much the American people love him out there in that vast, wide swath of land. And that's what so that's the big plan. But then so he comes down the escalator, makes the announcement, and goes off the rails and starts calling Mexicans rapists and criminals and murderers and whatever else. And a few days later,
and the people cheering.
And yes, the people are cheering. If you've seen that escalator, I think by now most people have seen the escalator coming down with Melania. The people cheering down there are extras. And he's paid extras $50 a piece to be there in Trump T-shirts and holding signs and, all of that. It's all fake. It's all fake. It's as fake as the gold-plated escalator he's coming down. It's gold-plated, folks. It's not real gold. He comes down, he says this about Mexicans, and within days, NBC fires him.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
It goes completely against what he thinks is going to happen. And now they don't want him at all. And now he's lost his job because of his racism. And he's already booked and paid for these two events. I believe one was in Phoenix and one was in Mobile, Alabama. And, you know, they're paid for, they've rented the arenas or the auditoriums or whatever. And now this is the part that I'm not privy to his conversations with Don Jr. and Eric, although I usually am, but not this one.
I'm going to ask you about your relationship with Jared, but that's coming.
Okay, I'm ready for it. I'm here. This is full transparency. But they decide, we've already paid for it. Let's go and do the rallies. So they go and do the rallies. And we show in the film the look on Trump's face. There's 40,000 people in that stadium in Mobile, Alabama. And he could not believe it. I mean, he's never been in front of 40,000 people. He's never had that experience like you and I have. But there is something when you stand on a stage and there is a lot of people. Okay, it happened to me at the University of Florida. They changed me from the auditorium into the basketball arena. It never happened before, and there people just come to hear me talk. And there's 14,000 people in the arena. When you step on that stage, 14,000 people are cheering. You're like, wow. I'm glad I didn't listen to my guidance counselors. And so you see the look, though. I show the look in his face in my movie. You see the epiphany taking place in his head. It's like, well, maybe running for president isn't such a bad idea. To hell with NBC and The Apprentice. And he decides to actually go ahead with it. Remember early on where pundits and people were saying, there's no campaign apparatus. There's nobody in charge. There's no place. How do you donate to the campaign? Right? It was all that. He's not really running. He's not really wanting to do the job. This is just some kind of stunt. I mean, it was kind of obvious to everybody, but I actually show how the stunt got launched, and then we end up being the losers for it in the long run because he decides he likes it. He loves these crowds, and they just keep getting bigger, and the rest is history.
And you have people like Les Moonves, now disgraced, who is saying things like, you know, it's great for us. It just may not be great for America.
Who would have thought that this circus would come to town? But, you know, it may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. That's all I got to say.
Les Moonves, who was the head of CBS, and Jeff Zucker, who is the head of CNN, both kind of copped to the fact that they were putting him on the air a lot for free. He didn't have to pay for any of this. It's why Hillary, if you look at what he spent about $300 million. She spent almost $1 billion on her campaign. He didn't have to spend $1 billion because he got all this free airtime from the mainstream networks. And in the film, I show Moonves and Zucker yucking it up over how great it is that Donald Trump is running, because it was very good for business, and they sold a lot more ads.
So you have the red carpet treatment from the networks, you know, wall-to-wall coverage of his speeches. No, often, I mean, the other candidates, like, for example, Bernie Sanders, got nothing like this, even though he had some of the largest crowds of any of the candidates, Republican and Democrat. And I want to go back to that moment of George Stephanopoulos and Keith Ellison, the congressman from Minneapolis.
Yeah, so Keith Ellison is on the Sunday morning show that George has on ABC. And Keith says, very seriously, you know, you should take Trump seriously. He could end up leading the Republican Party ticket. And George Stephanopoulos just starts laughing hysterically. And our good friend Katrina over at The Nation, she's there on the panel. She's laughing. I mean, everybody was laughing. People watching the show were probably laughing. I mean, nobody really took it seriously because it just, that is not, a lot of bad things can happen in this country. That is not going to happen.
This man has got some momentum, and we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket.
Next, I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on.
Sorry to laugh.
But a few people, like Keith Ellison, were trying to warn people, you've got to take anybody seriously when they say something like this. And I think now, after all this time, we realize that Donald Trump is always lying and he's always telling the truth. And you have to be able to operate on both levels with him.
Explain.
Well, when he says, I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it, you know that he's not going to shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue, I hope. But you know he could get away with it. I mean, both are true. And it's always that way with him. So I pay close attention to him when he says things that sound crazy and you think he's just being crazy. I always go, well, you know, he may mean that. I mean, even in the film when he says that about, we're not going to arm teachers, you know, after Parkland, Florida, we're not going to arm teachers. And then within 2 seconds, he goes, well, maybe 20% of them. And then 2 seconds later, it could be 40%. It could be. It's like he says one thing that could be the truth, but he switches it up within seconds. This happens all the time. He'll switch something up the same day, or within a day or two. Part of that process, and this is the evil genius of Trump, is that he knows how to keep, especially liberals, all scatterbrained and not knowing what's going on. Wait a minute, he said that. No, he said that. No, he said that. Like we take people, when people say something, we take it literally. He knows he can just say stuff, get everybody discombobulated, and he becomes the master distractor. He knows how to get people off the topic and onto something else so that we won't really be paying attention to what he's really up to.
Oscar-winning filmmaker Michael Moore, his new film, Fahrenheit 11/9, is out today. We'll be back with more of Moore in a minute.
At my inauguration, I burned tobacco at the opening. Send thanks and prayers to Creator and our living bees then. I'd sit you down with your abuelita, rewrite history so our kids could see where we came from and a new destiny. From Flint to Cali, water flowing pure and free. My Department of Peace will melt guns into bike racks. Budget cuts to corporate kickbacks. If I was president, well, there'd still be drama. Takes a village, stickula, generational trauma. So shake your spine, put your hands up high. We got a different kind of party in the White House tonight. If I was president, hey, what would I do if I was president? Hey, I'd ask you if you were president. Hey, what would you do if it was you, or you?
If I Was President by Las Cafeteras, here in our Democracy Now! Studio. To hear the whole song and interview, go to democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. As we return now to our conversation with Oscar-winning filmmaker Michael Moore, his new film, Fahrenheit 11/9, opens today around the country. This is a clip from the film about the recent wave of teacher strikes that began in West Virginia.
This was the chilly scene outside Point Harmony Elementary Friday morning. Upwards of 50 teachers lining the sidewalk, all on a mission.
The teachers decided on their own to go out on strike and do it by themselves, one school district at a time.
Alameda County is on the courthouse steps.
People are chanting, we're Facebook live streaming that, and other counties are commenting on there and saying, I wish I was there. It escalated really quickly. So 4 go out, then 7 go out.
And then 55 of 55 counties. The strike will go on in all of them tomorrow.
That's from Fahrenheit 11/9. Michael Moore, the Oscar-winning filmmaker. It's his latest film, These Teacher Strikes, Michael, and teachers in this country, what they're going through.
Well, there's an uprising going on right now with teachers all over the country. And it's one of the best things I've seen in a long time. These teachers in West Virginia, they're fighters. Their union, their own union, their leadership tried to discourage them from going out on strike. They wouldn't listen to them. They went out on strike. They got all 55 counties to go out on strike. And then when they finally got the governor to give them what they wanted,
Governor
Jim Justice, I know, you can't write this stuff, right? The bus drivers and the lunch ladies and everybody else were also on strike with the teachers. He would only give the raise to the teachers. And they said, no, you got to give it to the bus drivers and the cooks and the janitors and everybody else. And he wouldn't do it, so they wouldn't go back to school. They stayed out on strike until there was justice for the custodians and the people in the lunchroom and the bus drivers. That kind of solidarity, if we all ever get together and support each other and not cross each other's picket lines, that is the scariest thing for these people, because they won't know what to do. They won't be able to run their businesses. They won't be able to run their schools. They won't be able to do anything.
Speaking of running, talk about Fitbits.
Well, this was the crazy thing, that this governor, they were trying to think of ways to reduce the health care costs. So the first idea was, well, let's charge the teachers more for their health care, like let's double what they've got to contribute. And then let's make them wear Fitbits, where they'd have to buy their own Fitbits, and the Fitbit would send how many steps they're taking, what physical activity they're doing.
This is a little watch, like a bracelet.
Yeah, it's like a little bracelet, but it records what you're doing, and in this case, in West Virginia, it would send to a central computer at the Board of Education just how active you were being. If you, by the end of the month or the end of the year, whatever, if you didn't take enough steps, if you didn't do enough physical activity, you were fined like something like $500. And they knew everything you were doing from this Fitbit. So that was the other part of the negotiations. The Fitbits had to go, and they were successful in getting rid of them.
And teachers selling their blood.
My husband, he even sells plasma, his own plasma when things get super tough.
He sells his blood.
It's caused us, yes.
Yes, well, this is a scene I had in Roger and Me 30 years ago, where the people of Flint were going to sell their plasma at the plasma center because either the job they had didn't earn enough money to keep them above the poverty level, or they lost their General Motors job. And so you'd walk into this plasma center and you'd see all these chairs that were like medical chairs with everybody, being tapped.
I only do it with my right arm. It's not so bad. You don't track it up. They only do it in 2 places.
I mean, it really looked like a scene from Soylent Green or some kind of weird sci-fi movie where in the future, everybody's blood was being sucked from them. And the fact that 30 years later I would be dealing with the same thing is just, I can't tell you how angry I am, frankly, that we're still living in this kind of society.
Well, that takes me to the last clip that we're going to play from your film. We're talking to Michael Moore, the Oscar-winning filmmaker who won that Oscar for Bowling for Columbine, yet another school shooting. But this one is a clip that features 99-year-old Ben Ferenz, the last surviving Nuremberg prosecutor.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Last week, ICE agents fanned out in raids like this one in every state.
Ripping children away from their families under this new policy.
¿De dónde son ustedes? ¿Y tú?
Guatemala.
No llores. Vas a llegar con... Mira, ella te va a explicar y te va a ayudar.
Taking babies away from their mother and locking up one or the other and separating them because they didn't do harm to anybody. They just didn't comply with the stupid regulations. That's a crime against humanity, in my judgment.
Ben Ferenz, the last Nuremberg prosecutor. Explain, Michael Moore.
Well, I wanted to go speak to him. I didn't realize there was only one surviving Nuremberg prosecutor. He lives just outside the city here. He is 99. I think his wife is turning 100 in another month or so. And he is a witness from the past, a witness to what happens when you allow fascism to become the way of life and the law of the land. And he's very powerful, the things he says in the film. At one point, he says that Donald Trump, in doing some of these things that he's done, is committing crimes against humanity. And he says, this is, I can't deal with this because I'm thinking, you know, we hung people for doing some of these things, for behaving like this. And one of the inspirations to make this film was a book I'd read back in the 1980s by Bertram Gross called Friendly Fascism. And in the book, Gross says that the fascism of the 21st century will not come with concentration camps and swastikas. It will come with a smiley face and a TV show. That the fascism that will take hold in the 21st century there won't be a lot of guns fired because the population will be brainwashed enough. First, they'll be dumbed down, you know, ruin their schools, reduce their press, put whistleblowers in jail, and then brand things, the smiley face. Don't use swastikas. Just make it happy. You're going to be happier if you go my way, the Trump way. And this is what I find most frightening when I think about, and what I hope this film does in terms of ripping the mask off what's really going on here. That we are on, you used the word precipice earlier, we are on a precipice. We are on that edge. Democracy has no self-correcting mechanism. It's a piece of paper, the Constitution. I know we like to get all teary-eyed and all goo-goo about, you know, our wonderful Constitution. It's a piece of paper. And it's the human beings in each era that decide exactly what's going to go on, which part we're going to listen to and which part we're not of this Constitution. And if we get too close to the edge, where we've given up too many of our rights, where we've allowed the democracy to be whittled down, where we've made voting a most difficult thing to do for people who have the right to vote and should be voting. If we do all of that, it could easily fall off that cliff. Before you know it, it could be gone. And you have to operate with that. You know, you'll hear from people on other networks or other shows I'll be on, well, Mike, why are you making the comparisons between Hitler and Trump? And I always say to them, well, that's really not the movie. The movie is more comparing us to the Germans, the good Germans, one of the most civilized, cultured, educated, liberal democracies on the planet Earth. And they went along. There was a national emergency. The Reichstag burned down, their parliament. And you know, Hitler said the communists did it. We got to get rid of these communists. And sure enough, you know, Hitler's party won 32% of the parliament in 1932. 32%, which was the most. 19% went to the communists. And then the others were mostly liberal left parties, social democrats, et cetera. By Hitler getting rid of those 19 communist seats, or the 19% of the seats, you know, all of a sudden he had a chance to take those. 19 and 32 is 51. Now you're the majority. But he was worried. Hitler was worried that, this is a little, I'm pushing this a little here. The people, we're a democracy, they're not going to like this. So he holds a plebiscite. A number of months later, holds a plebiscite and asks the people, yes or no, are you okay with us, the Nazis, taking over here, and I'm going to be both president and chancellor. Hindenburg had one of those jobs. He was an old man, and then he died. Not of a, you know, not, he just died. He was old. He was died. Not trying to pin that on Hitler, okay, but he died. And Hitler said, I should have his job. I should be president and chancellor. Can I? And they went and had an election. And the majority of Germans voted yes. And I show that, the ballot, in the movie. They voted yes for this. And the front page editorial in the Jewish Weekly of Frankfurt, Germany, said, okay, everybody, fellow Jews, calm down. It's okay. Yes, he's crazy. Yes, his people are thugs. But, you know, it's not going to be as bad as a lot of you are thinking. Come on, we're Germans. This is a democracy. You know, we are not going to be rounded up and put into ghettos because we have a constitution. This is the editorial in the Jewish Weekly.
You held this up during your Broadway play.
Yes, right. And it's in the movie because I want people, anybody who is still thinking, Mike, calm down, Mike. I mean, Trump. I mean, yes, he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but come on. You know, don't be scaring the people like this. I'm not scaring anybody. If you are not already terrified by what he is doing, by what he is up to, I'm serious. And everybody else needs to get serious too. I took this man seriously from the beginning, and I'm here and I'm telling you now that he has his plans for the way he'd like things to be. He has no intention of leaving the White House. He knows he cannot be indicted. He knows the Constitution won't allow Mueller to indict him. He can be an unindicted, not co-conspirator, but he'll be an unindicted criminal. He doesn't think he's going to be impeached. He's going to call it all rigged. Even if he loses the 2020 election, he'll say it's rigged. He has plans for calling off the election. Republicans last year were asked if he wanted to postpone the election because of all these illegals that are voting. You know, Hillary got those 3 million illegal votes. Would you support him postponing the election? 52% of Republicans said that they would support Trump postponing the 2020 election. We have to get serious about this, and we have to be real. And if I could just say one last story. I tried to convince Steve Bannon to sit down in front of my camera so I could ask him some questions. He said, well, I'll need to talk to you first. Let me come by, and we'll see. And he came over to my production office. And I sat there with him for 2 hours talking to him. And I said, just tell us, really, how'd you pull this off? How did you and Trump outsmart maybe the smartest candidate ever to run for office, just on pure IQ alone, perhaps one of the smartest? And he said, well, I have a very easy answer for you. Our side, we go for the head wound. Your side, you like to have pillow fights. And that's why we'll win, even though I agree with you, as he says to me, and as I show in the film, there's more of us than there are of them. He's not afraid of that because they're fighters. And they will stand up and they will fight for the things they believe in. And they know we will back down and we will compromise and we will say, okay, Obamacare is okay, even though it's not really universal health care. Yeah, we'll go along with that. You know, we're just happy that our kids can be covered until they're 26. You know, and we just rationalize all this stuff. And they know that about us. And they know how to defeat us with that. They have no intention of going away. And this is the angry white man party. And they know their days are numbered because this nation right now is almost 70% either female, people of color, or young adults between the ages of 18 and 35, or a combination of those three things. That's America. They know it. They know their days are numbered, and they're going to try to grab whatever they can before
and suppress the vote.
And suppress the vote and gerrymander it and do whatever they can, pack the Supreme Court, whatever it is, they're going to try and do it because they know we will not put our bodies on the line to stop them.
Oscar-winning filmmaker Michael Moore, his new film Fahrenheit 11/9 opens in theaters today. Tune in Monday when we'll play more of the interview with Michael on Flint, Michigan and the rise of progressive congressional candidates. And to hear him talk about Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and the accusations against him, visit DemocracyNow.org. Special thanks to Mike Burke, John Hamilton, Julie Crosby, Trina Ndura, Libby Rainey, Ariel Boone and Nermeen Sheikh. I'm Amy Goodman, our website, DemocracyNow.org. Thanks for joining us.